Discover the amazing truth, love's incredible power exposed. After 25 years of the hidden journey, Sarah stood in the attic, the air thick with dust and the remnants of childhood. Outside, thunder rumbled ominously, much like the storm brewing within her. She was a single mother, a teacher, and now, an unwilling caretaker of a crumbling family home that whispered memories of sacrifice and love. Each day, she faced the scuffed linoleum floors of Whitman Elementary, pouring her heart into her students while suffocated by the burden of expectations. Could she ever escape the shadow of her parents' legacy? As her fingers grazed the old trunk, her heart raced. Inside lay a trove of letters penned by her mother, delicate and yellowed with time. Sarah hesitated. Would she uncover a version of her mother she never knew? Or learn that familial loyalty had suffocated her mother's dreams? There was unease in the possibility, a tightness in her chest that made her rethink every decision she had made to uphold this familial mantle. She took a deep breath, the scent of damp wood mixing with that of autumn leaves wafting through the open attic window. Each letter she unfolded breathed life into an artistic world her mother had set aside, sketches of vibrant landscapes and vivid portraits accompanied by expressions of passionate longing. The words unveiled a love story, a hidden connection that pulled at Sarah's own heartstrings and ignited a craving for the creative spirit she had buried under layers of practicality. The memories stirred old dreams she believed had long been abandoned, making her question everything she thought she knew. Before she could tumble too deep into nostalgia, Sarah's racing mind was interrupted. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the storm outside rattled the window panes, Sarah wondered if she could harness her mother's passion and finally pursue her dreams. But contemplating an exhibit pushed knots into her stomach. The town, rife with entrenched rivalries and prejudices, could very well suffocate the budding hope she clung to. She recalled the looks exchanged over half-finished conversations, whispers of scandal hanging in the air, ready to shatter the delicate bond she might forge with Jake the art critic who, in a whirlwind of serendipity, had stepped into her life, seeing her mother's beauty where others merely turned away. Yet, what if this connection only stirred the hatred rooted in the town's history? The very thought left her breathless. Would rediscovering her family's artistic legacy and her own heart's desire unravel the fragile threads of her life? Just when she thought she had touched the surface of an answer, revelations from the letters hinted at deeper injustices, long-buried truths threatening to demolish any hope of reclaiming her family's standing. Sarah felt herself careen wildly within a storm of confusion, caught between the flicker of ambition and the dull ache of expectation. How could she honor her mother's memory while facing down the whispered warnings that seemed to echo through the halls of time? Her heart thrummed as she contemplated love, family, and the relentless pull of legacy. The storm grew fiercer, and so did her resolve to confront the past, but was she truly ready to unleash the powerful truths contained in those letters? In that moment, with the weight of the world pressing down, one terrifying thought loomed: could she truly face the aftermath of unearthing her family history, or would it swallow her whole? The storm raged on outside, the rain drumming against the roof like an impatient heartbeat. Sarah sat cross-legged on the attic floor, the letters spread around her like fallen leaves. Each word was not merely ink on paper, they were strands of her mother's soul, entangled in narratives of passion and repression. Her fingers trembled as they grazed the edges of a postcard featuring a vibrant painting that depicted a sunrise over a serene lake, her mother's dreamscape, perhaps, a world she had longed to inhabit but never could. The quiet attic had transformed into a battlefield of emotions, and with the flickering light casting shadows against the walls, Sarah wondered what her own dreams were. No. She questioned whether she even had them anymore. Was she destined to stay trapped in a cycle of expectation, a life predetermined by the sacrifices of others? Each letter made her heart swell and ache at once. It was a profound realization that her mother's repressed creativity paralleled her own muted aspirations. Flashes of her days at Whitman Elementary flickered in her mind, moments of joy when she inspired her students to embrace their own artistic pursuits. Yet afterward came the weight of daily life, the flood of paperwork and parental expectations, which systematically eroded her energy and enthusiasm. With each passing day, she fell deeper into apathy, a pattern mirrored in her mother's letters, aimed at reclaiming a joy that was so often suppressed. Then there was Jake. His gaze, passionate and penetrating, had left an indelible mark on her. The brief but electric conversation they shared was a beacon in the stormy night, a reminder that someone acknowledged her humanity, her existence beyond motherhood and obligation. But she was frightened of the vulnerability that blossomed whenever he was near, of the intimacy that threatened to dig up buried fears. "Can I risk opening my heart?" she asked herself, wrestling with the question as she rifled through the letters. Inside, her mother described a love lost to duty, dreams dimmed by conformity. It echoed profoundly in Sarah's battle against her own reality. She hesitated, clutching a letter that dripped with unfulfilled passions and dreams abandoned at the altar of familial commitment. A silent prayer or perhaps a challenge filled the space. The ink seemed to demand courage. Sarah closed her eyes, imagining herself stepping into the vivid world her mother had once painted. The thunder crashed again, louder this time, cutting through her reverie. It spurred a decision, propelling her into action. "I will not be silenced, I will not let fear decide my fate," she murmured, the storm outside now mirroring the tempest within her. With renewed determination, Sarah began to plan her next steps. What if she organized an exhibition, honoring her mother's unfulfilled aspirations while sharing her own artistic journey? It was a daunting thought, but suddenly enlivening. She envisioned the community, maybe even Jake, witnessing a side of life they had so long neglected, yet lurking beneath her resolve was an unsettling shadow. What would they say? What barbs would resurface, hiding among the whispers of disapproval? Confronting the legacy of her family home could ignite past conflicts, unfamiliar frictions that could pull her right back into despair. As the winds howled outside, echoing her internal struggle, one chilling thought emerged: would her pursuit of art and self-expression lead to liberation, or would it drag out every dark tale buried beneath years of silence? Could she stand against the impending gale? With a clenched jaw and fraying nerves, Sarah snatched the letters and stood. The choices loomed like the dark clouds outside, heavy, laden with expectation, yet charged with electricity. And as she wrestled with her ambitions, the notion took root deep within her: the time had come to face her own truth, even if it meant illuminating shadows long kept hidden. In that decisive moment, Sarah recognized that the storm, both within and outside, would not relent. Would it sweep her away before she could find her footing, or would it clear a path to unimagined possibilities? The answer awaited her, just beyond the horizon. The attic felt both like a sanctuary and a prison as Sarah wrestled with her thoughts. The letters lay scattered around her, and their ink and paper had transformed from relics of a once painful past to beacons of possibility. Yet beneath the flickers of hope lingered shadows of doubt. Where would she even begin? Sitting there, the remnants of her mother's dreams intertwining with her own, Sarah felt a surge of fear tighten around her heart. What if her attempt at self-expression turned sour? Voices from childhood echoed in her mind: "You're not an artist, stop pretending." The echoes of disapproval brought forth a tempest of emotions, swelling with every breath she took. She pushed the thoughts away, forcing herself to focus on the original idea that ignited this fire within her: a personal exhibition dedicated to unearthing the art she had stashed away. "Yes," she whispered resolutely. "It will honor her, it will honor me." The words brought a tumult of emotions, but also clarity. However, a creeping realization stung her. Organizing an exhibition meant confronting her own fears and, ultimately, the opinions of a community she had always felt isolated within. Planning this endeavor became not just a creative task, but a personal reckoning. How could she support her dreams when she constantly second-guessed her worth? To ignite her determination, Sarah turned to her own artistic pursuits, unearthing sketches, photographs, and paintings stored in dusty boxes around her home. As she sifted through her creations, a rush of forgotten memories flooded back. The objects represented whispers of authenticity before silence had dimmed the roar of her aspirations. Days turned into nights as she dedicated herself to this quest for personal truth. Undeterred by her lingering insecurities, she began reaching out to local artists and friends for support. Each conversation felt like a delicate dance, her voice wavering yet sincere as she dared to articulate her desires. But for every encouraging word, the nagging what-if pushed against her, demanding to be heard. Could she embrace the vulnerability required to unveil her heart to the world? Simultaneously, Jake floated in her thoughts, stirring feelings she wasn't prepared to dissect. She found herself daydreaming about their conversation, how exhilarating yet terrifying it felt to connect with someone who saw beyond the surface. What lay between them? Was he merely a soothing balm for her bruised spirit, or could he be part of her journey towards self-discovery? He had inadvertently become a litmus test for her growth, and the idea shocked her. One evening, after a long day of gathering her materials, Sarah stood before a blank canvas in her small studio space. The weight of her emotions surged, and she suddenly found herself reaching for the brush. Intentional strokes emerged, raw and stirring, her heart's yearnings dripping onto the canvas. Yet as vibrant colors swirled, a darker part of her resisted this liberated act. Would this artistic freedom ultimately reveal her to be a fraud? A cacophony of self-doubt crashed against her defenses, drowning out the voice that urged her forward. In that moment, she hesitated, brush hovering above the canvas. The storm outside roared in tandem with the chaos within, a reminder of the stakes at play. This was a pivotal moment. Would she allow fear to dictate her story yet again, or would she brave this unexplored terrain? With a deep breath, she pushed through her hesitation. No more, she told herself. The pursuit of clarity dimmed the voices of doubt. As the brush finally made contact with the canvas, Sarah's pulse quickened, her heartbeat became an anthem of defiance against all she had kept secret. What would emerge from this act of courage? As she painted, a new question flickered in her mind: how would those who had watched her fade into apathy react upon witnessing her reawakening? Yet she felt exhilarated, emboldened, as strokes met canvas. This was her moment, an articulation of a life partially lived that was now unleashing on the horizon of possibility. As the colors fused, the boundary between her mother's dreams and her own began to dissolve. But the realization dawned: a confrontation loomed closer than she anticipated. The time was coming for Sarah to face not just her fears but the reflections of those she had long tried to avoid. Tomorrow would be significant. The storm inside her might be raging now, but she sensed the winds shifting. What lay ahead promised both conflict and revelation. Would she find allies, or would confrontation stifle her momentum? The question loomed large, unresolved, waiting to be answered. The morning sunlight filtered through the small window in Sarah's studio, casting a warm glow over the canvas that bore the imprint of her late-night revelations. The chaos of colors remained as a testament to both her emotional tumult and her resolve to embrace the artist within her. Yet despite the vibrancy surrounding her, uncertainty lingered in the corners of her heart, twisting the thrill of creativity into the anxiety of reception. Today was pivotal. Standing before her creation, Sarah understood that it was not merely about the art but a confrontation with her own demons. She had been boxed into a corner for too long, and stepping out would require exposing herself to both admiration and criticism from those she had long sought to avoid. Her mind flickered back to the letters. Each word was rooted in her mother's unfulfilled dreams and aspirations, a narrative Sarah had internalized and struggled against for years. Would she become another ghost of unfulfilled potential? The thought twisted in her stomach, propelling her to grab the brush once more. As she poured her energy into the canvas, her phone buzzed insistently on the table. It was an invitation to a local art gathering, a chance for her to network and perhaps unveil what she had been working on. The prospect thrilled and terrified her. Would she be able to present herself as the artist she was beginning to believe she could be? The gathering had long been a source of both intrigue and dread for Sarah. It represented the community she had always felt disconnected from. Yet, she recognized it as an opportunity, a space she could either slip silently into or boldly claim as her own. She could feel the urge to run, to hide in the comfort of anonymity, but the fierce self-advocacy bubbling inside her propelled her closer to the edge of commitment. "Just go," she whispered, as if reminding herself of the steps forward she had already begun to take. The decision wasn't merely about sharing her art, it was also a testament of her growth, a declaration that she deserved a place among other artists, whether they accepted her or not. Time slipped by as she prepared herself, the prospect of imminent confrontation looming large in her mind. What if the familiar voices from her past emerged in critique, echoing their disapproval? "You're not one of them." Would she still believe in her right to belong? In the hours leading up to the gathering, Sarah battled her inner critic. For every ounce of excitement, doubt cascaded. She dressed carefully, choosing colors that reflected both her emerging identity and her mother's spirit, deep blues and vibrant reds that flowed effortlessly together, much like her intentions. As she applied her lipstick, she looked into the mirror, whispering affirmations to validate her presence in the artistic world. "Today, I will be seen," she declared, voice steady with newfound purpose. Arriving at the venue, her heart raced in sync with the music thrumming from within. Stepping through the door was like holding her breath just before plunging into deep water. The room buzzed with energy, artists discussing their latest projects, laughter punctuating the air as anecdotes flew amongst the crowd. Yet, instead of retreating into herself, Sarah took a deep breath and waded into the conversation. As she navigated through the crowd, the question that had plagued her began to shift. The what-ifs transformed. What if she could find fellow artists who shared her struggles? It was time to embrace not just her art but everything that made her unique. Just as she found herself deep in conversation with a woman whose painting stirred something familiar within her, Sarah glanced across the room and saw Jake. Their eyes met, for a brief moment, igniting a spark in her chest. Was he a supportive ally or an additional source of pressure? The atmosphere clapped with laughter, blending with the distant sounds of clinking glasses, and Sarah felt the weight of her decision flow throughout her body. As she struggled to ground herself amidst the mix of excitement and anxiety, the words she had long silenced reverberated once more: "You can be seen. You deserve this." In that moment, with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, Sarah realized this was not just about sharing her work, it was about forging new connections and confronting the past in a profound way. What would Jake think? Could he stand with her as she stepped into the brilliance of her potential? Her heart raced as she approached him, each step a beat in a new rhythm of bravery. Today marked the beginning of Sarah's exploration within a community she had feared, and the volatile cocktail of emotions was intoxicating. But as their conversation unfolded, she sensed something unexpected gathering on the horizon, a challenge not only to her artistry but to her deepest insecurities. Would the connection she felt with Jake propel her forward, or would it unravel the fragile tapestry of self-discovery she had begun to weave? The doubt, laden with potential impact, loomed waiting to be confronted, and suddenly, the question at hand could no longer hide. How much of herself would she be willing to share, and at what cost? Sarah stood before Jake, the weight of unspoken vulnerabilities hanging between them. As their conversation ebbed and flowed, she felt an unsettling mix of exhilaration and terror coursing through her veins. The familiar lyrics of self-doubt crept in like shadows, whispering insidiously, "Perhaps you don't belong here. Who do you think you are?" She took a steadying breath, focusing instead on the warmth of Jake's presence. There was something in his gaze that felt promising. He leaned in, curiosity evident on his face, encouraging her to share more about her inspirations. Every detail she recounted felt like a piece of her identity being laid bare in front of him. "Art is a way for me to reclaim parts of myself that I've lost," she confessed, her voice quivering slightly. As she spoke, images of her mother's dreams mingled with her own struggles, crystallizing in an unfiltered narrative that she had long shied away from sharing. Each word seemed to sever ties with her insecurities, buoying her spirit as she recognized the power in her honesty. Jake listened intently, nodding along as she revealed her creative journey. "It's not just about painting," she said, surprising herself with the intensity of her conviction. "It's about unearthing the raw parts of me that I'd hidden for years. Each brushstroke is an act of defiance against the fear that has held me captive." Pride fluttered in her chest as she noticed Jake's expression shift, a blend of admiration and understanding illuminating his features. She was not just an artist to him, she was a force of nature, breaking free from the tumultuous shadows of her past. The realization snapped into focus, daring her to ponder, was this acceptance what she had long sought? But just as her confidence began to build, an unsettling voice within her chimed in with a different question: what happens now? Will he judge you or embrace you? The thrill of unveiling her truth felt exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. Would he be able to accept a version of her that even she was still unraveled to understand? Feeling the tremor of uncertainty, Sarah abruptly shifted the subject to Jake's work, hoping to regain control of the moment. But the conversation flowed effortlessly, their shared rhythm offering her a sense of comfort without losing the tension coursing beneath the surface. They spoke of influences, of overcoming creative blocks, and as she learned more about his artistic endeavors, her respect for him deepened. Then, as Jake animatedly discussed a recent project, Sarah could feel her heart rate quickening, an important realization gnawing at the edges of her consciousness. She was partially falling for him not just because of his passion, but because he seemed to understand the layers of the soul that art could reveal. This was entirely uncharted territory for her. Was she willing to risk the vulnerability that came with deeper emotional engagement? Would the courage she found in her art translate into the courage needed to forge genuine connections in her life? Just when she felt the weight of those questions begin to settle, a familiar face intruded into their space: Laura, an established local artist who had intimidated Sarah since her initial entry into this world. With an air of confidence that only came with experience, Laura approached them, her eyes alighting first on Jake and then flicking towards Sarah, taking measure of her presence. "Jake, it's good to see you," she said, her voice smooth as velvet yet laced with condescension as she turned her attention to Sarah. "I don't believe we've met." Sarah's heart sank. Her impulse was to shrink back, to hide behind the bravado she had mustered. She could feel every heartbeat echoing like a drum in her ears. How would she respond to Laura? Would she allow herself to be undermined once more, or could she harness the strength that had emerged just moments before? The room felt suddenly smaller, the laughter and chatter dulling as her focus narrowed on the intimidating figure before her. How much of her newfound determination was she prepared to defend? As Laura smirked, clearly assessing her worth, Sarah clenched her fists subtly. The moment had arrived, and she realized she would need to confront her budding insecurities head-on, not only for herself but to embody the artist she aspired to become. With deep breath, she steadied her voice, bracing herself for the exchange ahead. This was not just about art but a fight for her space in this world, one full of potential connection and unyielding challenges. She had only just begun to discover her capabilities, and as she prepared to stand her ground, a single thought crystallized in her mind: what would she choose, fear or courage? The stakes were rising, but one thing was clear: Sarah was ready to redefine her narrative and stand firm in her truth, no matter the cost. As Laura continued, dripping with skepticism, a new determination enveloped Sarah, awakening the fire within her that could not be extinguished. The question hung heavily in the air: would she rise against the judgment that plagued her or hide once again in the shadows? Sarah locked her gaze onto Laura, every calculated quirk of her expression igniting a fire within her. The room buzzed around them, but all she could feel was the palpable tension weaving its way through her thoughts. No longer would she allow herself to cower in the shadows cast by more dominant figures. "Actually, I'm Sarah," she said, her voice steady despite the tumultuous emotions roiling inside her. There was a defiance in her tone, a quiet but firm resolve that pushed the insecurities down where they couldn't easily escape. "I've seen your work, it's incredibly inspiring." Laura's smirk widened, a thinly veiled effort to dismiss her compliment without acknowledgement. "Inspiring can be quite subjective, don't you think?" She shot back, her eyes glinting with amusement. The word struck at Sarah's core, but she could sense that these moments, the unexpected challenges, were pivotal. Rather than retreating, she stood taller, improvising under pressure. Subjective can sometimes be the lens through which most heartfelt works are viewed. It's often just a matter of perspective. Jake's gaze darted between the two women, sensing the tension but silently rooting for Sarah. She could almost feel his support wrap around her like a comforting cloak. The room, filled with aspiring artists and critics alike, faded away as she focused on her truth. In a world that judged work solely on metrics and trends, she wanted to emerge unscathed, an artist grounded in authenticity. "Oh sweet girl," Laura replied, an edge creeping into her tone, "art is not just about perspectives, it's also about understanding the craft, the skill. Perhaps you should explore that before diving into critical discussions." Suddenly, Sarah's world shifted. Laura wasn't just a mere critic, she represented the adherence to the establishment that had intimidated her for years, the very reason she had hesitated to paint bold strokes, to explore her palette with unflinching passion. But what if the knowledge of conventionality wasn't the boundary it once appeared to be? What if the journey itself was as critical as the end product? Taking a breath, Sarah ventured deeper, armed not only with her angst but with a newfound sense of her competence. "I think my journey has been about learning, but also about rediscovering parts of myself that likely don't fit into any conventional mold. I've learned that skill can be developed, but passion can't be ignored." Laura's eyebrows rose, surprisingly intrigued despite her obvious disdain. Perhaps Sarah had piqued her interest. This wasn't merely an exchange of words, it was an assertion of self-worth. This was the moment she had craved, the opportunity to confront her self-doubt in an arena she had shied away from. As the conversation continued, Sarah felt something inside shift. Each articulate response felt like a paintbrush stroke boldly coloring a canvas that had long been blank. Instead of wondering if she belonged, her thoughts recalibrated toward affirmations. She belonged here, amongst artists, pursuing her vision, free from the shackles of judgment. Laura began to offer critiques, assessing Sarah's work on an artistic level rather than a personal one, and for the first time, Sarah felt the glimmers of confidence emerge, unexpected and exhilarating. She realized that this dialogue could, in fact, refine her craft rather than dismantle her spirit. With each passing moment, her anxiety dripped away, replaced by a fervor to learn and grow. "I appreciate your feedback," she said, surprising even herself with the ardency in her tone. "But I also believe that artistry thrives where authenticity flourishes. We should aspire to bridge the gap between what is technically skillful and what moves our hearts." Amidst that exchange, a piece of Sarah solidified beyond self-doubt. This wasn't simply about Laura, it was a monumental turn inward as she calmly extended an invitation for others to witness her growth. Art was indeed personal, and her journey wouldn't stall at intimidation. The tension elevated, Sarah felt her fears receding like a tide. However, as Laura examined her more closely, a flicker of something deeper simmered in those condescending eyes. Recognition. "I'll be watching your progression, then," Laura said finally, her inflection softer, tinged with an artistry of respect. Sarah nodded, feeling a rush of confidence rush through her veins. Maybe she would constantly be judged, but she understood now that confrontation opened doors for transformation. With courage firmly rooted within her, she recognized that she was capable of owning her space, even among critics who once overshadowed her. Stepping away from Laura, with Jake still at her side, a question lingered tantalizingly in the air: was this confrontation merely a beginning, or would it propel Sarah into uncharted realms of her creative potential? Riding the wave of adrenaline, Sarah stepped away from Laura, her breath still quickening as the weight of the exchange settled in. Jake turned to her, a glimmer of admiration in his eyes. "That was amazing, Sarah. You held your ground," he said, simplicity burying layers of complexity. "Did I?" "I wasn't sure where it was going," she replied, surprised at the honesty in her voice. Internally, she reflected on her bravery, the way she had confronted an ideology that had, until this moment, dictated her self-worth. But uncertainty tangled itself in her thoughts. Was bravery enough? "Don't underestimate yourself," Jake urged, as if reading her mind. "That wasn't just a conversation, it was a declaration. You're redefining your narrative." He was right. Each word she exchanged with Laura felt like uncharted territory now reclaimed. Yet, as they moved beyond the critical gathering, an anxiety shadowed her newfound resolve. What's next? She wondered aloud. No concrete answers materialized. Would she dive back into her art? Flipping through her mental portfolio, a cascade of doubts slipped through her fingers. Beneath the facade of conviction lay an undercurrent of fear, fear of judgment, fear of criticism, and perhaps most importantly, fear of her own vulnerability when exposed on the canvas. "Are you okay?" Jake's question broke her contemplation. She forced a smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. "I just feel unsteady, I guess. It's like I've shown my cards but the game is far from over." "Then you play to win," he said with quiet confidence. His words resonated within the quietest parts of her mind. She had always lived in survival mode, tiptoeing around expectations. The conversation with Laura had been a catalyst, yet it seemed to have only unveiled settings on a more complex apparatus of self-discovery. "Maybe I should start an experimental series," Sarah mused aloud, feeling more liberated with each thought she verbalized. "I could juxtapose elements of traditional techniques with what I've learned about authenticity. That could be something truly mine." Jake nodded enthusiastically, capturing her vision. "Exactly. Don't be afraid to take risks, Sarah. Put your heart on that canvas, let it bleed color and chaos. Explore what makes you, you." With that, a spark ignited within her. The idea of pushing boundaries felt invigorating rather than intimidating. Confronting her insecurities was merely one facet of her journey. Now, she was compelled to craft a visual narrative that encapsulated her evolving identity. Over the next days, as Sarah let the bite of new ideas bathe her canvas, she faced an unexpected twist: invitation to exhibit at a local gallery. The prospect both thrilled and terrified her. For too long, she had kept her work sheltered from critical eyes. But this opportunity threatened to rip the shroud of anonymity from her art. "What if they don't get it?" echoed a nagging voice in her head. Every artist grappled with rejection, but she felt uniquely vulnerable navigating this newfound exposure. "Sarah, you have to share your voice," Jake implored when she expressed her doubts. "Whatever reaction you anticipate pales in comparison to the empowerment that comes from sharing your work." His encouragement sealed the urgency of her decision. As Sarah prepared for the exhibit, she questioned her past hesitations. Was her fear of failure merely a fear of inadequacy disguised? Would she allow herself to be painted with labels from critics, or could she redefine what it meant to be an artist on her own terms? In this tumultuous crossover between self-expression and public scrutiny, the true test laid ahead. Could she emerge confidently as her authentic self amidst inevitable judgments? The date loomed closer, the stakes higher, as anticipation filled the air. As the days drew closer to the exhibit, Sarah felt both the thrill of creative expression and the paralyzing grip of doubt intertwining like tendrils of ivy. Each stroke on her canvas served as both liberation and a reminder of the chasm that lay between her internal voice and the external world. She found solace in the act of creation but remained acutely aware that sharing her work would lay bare her vulnerabilities. Her studio became a refuge, filled with canvases each echoing her journey through the tumultuous landscape of self-discovery. Surrounded by vibrant colors, Sarah lost herself in the transformative process, yet fragments of insecurity lingered. What if it wasn't enough? What if her explorations of authenticity were dismissed as naive? The specter of judgment hovered near, a constant background noise to her creative fervor. Determined to confront these fears, she set a new challenge for herself. Each painting would not simply explore her identity, it should also invite conversation. She envisioned pieces that hinted at her past struggles, conveying her complexities rather than masking them. Would the rawness of her experiences resonate, or would they fall flat against the polished perfection often celebrated in the art world? One evening, as dusk filtered through her studio windows, Sarah made a decision. She would incorporate elements that echoed her personal narrative, the words spoken to her, the emotions stirred in her heart, and the boldness she had begun to embrace. She created pieces that allowed fragments of her inner dialogue to bleed into the artwork, using texture and color to evoke her feelings, creating a symphony of vulnerability. "Every color has a story," she whispered to herself as she applied deep blues for sadness and bright yellows for moments of joy. The creation process, once daunting, now became a conversation with herself. However, a nagging doubt surfaced: was she prepared to stand behind this unvarnished truth on display? She remembered a time when she would not have dared reveal her innermost struggles. Hesitation echoed in her mind. Could she really risk exposing the fragile layers of her identity to the scrutiny of an audience she didn't trust? Doubts shadowed each brushstroke, a small voice questioning her authenticity. One crisp morning, as she prepared for the final touches on her artwork, Jake visited her studio unexpectedly. He surveyed the canvases scattered around the room, each one a reflection of her evolving spirit. "This is incredible, Sarah," he remarked, genuine enthusiasm lighting up his face. "But how do you feel about showing all this?" Sarah paused, the question hanging heavily in the air. Despite the progress she'd made, a voice inside her still hesitated. "I'm excited but terrified," she admitted, her vulnerability laid bare once more. "What if they don't understand me?" "They will," he replied, a quiet confidence embedded in his tone. "And if they don't, it's not your fault. You can't control how others perceive your story. Focus on what you want to communicate." His support solidified her determination, but an unsettling question lingered: would revealing her truth invite acceptance, or would it further amplify her fears of rejection? As the exhibit date approached with relentless speed, the countdown became a chorus of anticipation and trepidation. Sarah stood on the cusp of transformation, teetering between anonymity and recognition. The external pressure was merging with her internal battle for acceptance. With her heart racing, she wondered, was she ready to embrace both her triumphs and her failures in front of strangers? Her forthcoming decision filled her with agitation and urgency. The moment of truth loomed, prompting an unshakable reckoning. In her quest to discover authenticity, could she finally find the courage to embrace her story fully, or would she let fear dictate her legacy? In the days that followed Jake's visit, Sarah found herself engulfed in a myriad of emotions, each one sharper than the last. Her studio transformed into a battleground, where thoughts collided like wildly swirling colors. No longer just a safe haven, the space had become a crucible of potential and peril. Each canvas now hung like a question mark, a silent challenge to her courage. Painting had always been her refuge, now, it demanded something more. As she sat before her easel each morning, she faced not just colors and textures, but her own reflection. The doubts she had tried to keep at bay surged forth. With every brushstroke, she grappled with the daunting reality that her art represented not just her identity, but her willingness to expose her vulnerabilities. What kind of artist was she if the world only saw half-truths? One evening, as she layered abstract patterns of turquoise and burgundy, Sarah's resolve shattered. Seated on the floor amidst scattered brushes and paint tubes, she fought against waves of insecurities that threatened to engulf her. Why should she risk the comfort of anonymity for the chance of authenticity? Did her experiences have any relevance outside her solitary world? She let out a frustrated sigh, flicking a paintbrush across her canvas in a dramatic motion, leaving a careless streak in its wake. But just as despair threatened to take hold, a different thought emerged. What if this struggle is part of her story, too? Wasn't it in the messiness of creation that real connection could begin? Liberated by this realization, Sarah picked up her palette with renewed vigor, allowing herself to paint without fear of imperfection. Each imperfection became a testament to her journey, echoing the raw emotion she had felt during pivotal moments of her life. On a particularly stormy afternoon, the winds howled outside her windows, mirroring the tempest inside her mind. She closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of turpentine and damp canvas, allowing herself to journey inward. Memories unfurled, the confidence of youthful exuberance, the sting of rejection, the euphoria of small victories. Each recollection fed into her artwork, creating a tapestry of experiences brimming with emotional depth. As the deadline for the exhibit loomed, she found herself contemplating what she wanted viewers to feel. It was less about her desire for validation than a yearning for connection, to show others they were not alone in their uncertainties. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider, and now she could piece together her story for anyone willing to listen. Then came the day she finally decided to venture out of her studio, the fresh air outside mingling with the scent of oils still clinging to her hands. Instead of retreating to her familiar walls, she journeyed to a nearby cafe where local artists gathered. As she entered, the buzz of conversation washed over her, stimulating and intimidating in equal measure. Each artist was a potential mirror reflecting fragments of their own journeys. A collective energy ignited within her. She sought out conversations, sharing snippets of her work and listening to stories of others. As she exchanged insights, the doubts that had once chained her began to loosen their grip. Sarah realized that her struggle for acceptance mirrored theirs. Each artist exhibited their flaws, highlighting the beauty and imperfection. The voice of her insecurities now seemed more distant, drowned out by the rhythm of shared experiences. The excitement was building. She began to understand, sharing her work could be as transformative for others as it was for her. Yet, nestled beneath her newfound excitement was that familiar whisper of fear. What if she still fell short? As she left the cafe, a sense of clarity washed over her. She was increasingly aware that this moment of change demanded more than just her artistry. It called for her to confront the potential fallout of being seen, not simply praised, but truly understood. With the exhibit just around the corner, Sarah stood at the threshold between fear and authenticity, grappling with the question that unraveled at the back of her mind. Would her truth resonate deeply enough to touch others, or would it fracture under the weight of expectation? The moment of reckoning was looming, and she could feel its pressure intensifying. As she stepped back into her studio, a thought lingered. How could she craft her narrative in a way that intertwined her vulnerability with her strength? The time had come to face her truth. The exhibit day arrived, crisp and alive with expectation. As Sarah stood in the gallery, her heart thundered against her chest, echoing the memories and emotions that had fused into her artwork. Each canvas, a chapter of her journey, now breathed in the space, awaiting the gaze of its audience. The vibrant colors represented both her mother's unfulfilled aspirations and her own emergent identity. As guests began to trickle in, Sarah felt the weight of scrutiny. Whispers of admiration and critique began to slice through her thoughts. She had spent countless hours perfecting her pieces, pouring her heart into each brushstroke, yet the specter of judgment remained palpable. Would they see her? Would they understand? In the midst of the crowd, Jake stood by her side, his presence a tether to reality amidst the chaos. "You did this, Sarah," he said, encouraging her with a nod. "You brought your vision to life. Now let them see it." His faith stirred something deep within her, a resolve that had been quietly simmering beneath layers of fear. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped out from behind her protective anonymity, her voice clear as she addressed the gathering crowd. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her heart racing with the vulnerability of revealing her soul. "This exhibition is not just about showcasing art, it's about unveiling truths, embracing our complexities, and allowing ourselves to be seen. Every piece here is a fragment of my journey, my family's story entwined with my own. It's an invitation to explore not just the art, but the heart behind it." As she spoke, Sarah noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Rather than cold stares of judgment, she caught glimpses of understanding and warmth radiating from the audience. She shared how each canvas represented a confrontation with fear, how she had lived in the shadows for too long, and how, in unearthing her mother's legacy of artistry, she had begun to reclaim her own voice. With each passing moment behind the easel, Sarah felt a profound sense of liberation wash over her. In sharing her truth, she confronted the very fears that had almost kept her silent. The nervous energy that once gripped her transformed into a thrill, invigorating her spirit as she journeyed deeper into the story she sought to tell. As guests began to interact with the artwork, she watched their expressions transform. What began as skepticism morphed into curiosity, as they approached her canvases with questions, eager to understand the emotions etched into each piece. Some leaned in to engage, admiring the way colors blended, evoking shared sentiments of hope, despair, and resilience. Others, captivated by her narrative, shared their own stories of struggle and triumph. In that moment, connections formed through art and experience. Jake's admiration was palpable as he navigated the gathering, introducing Sarah to others and championing her work. "You need to meet my friend Sarah, an extraordinary talent." Uncovering her voice, he declared, his enthusiasm emboldening her every step. As she conversed with patrons, receiving feedback and encouragement, the realization dawned: she was not merely an artist anymore. She was a storyteller, forging connections that transcended artistic boundaries. In unveiling her truth, she had solidified her place in a community she once feared, embodying the courage to embrace her identity fully. Amidst the excitement, her heart soared when she noticed Laura observing from a distance, a contemplative expression etched on her face. As Sarah approached the formidable artist, nerves danced in her stomach, yet she held her head high. "Thank you for coming." Laura responded with a nod of acknowledgement, her eyes catching the light of several colorful canvases. "You've pushed boundaries, Sarah," she said, her tone layered with respect. "Your work has a voice. Don't shy away from it." At that moment, the space between them transformed from rivalry to recognition, a challenge turned into a respect forged through artistic exchange. Sarah felt a rush of pride, not because she sought validation from Laura, but because she had found the courage to stand firmly in her truth. As the evening unfurled, each interaction served as an affirmation of her transformation. Sarah reveled in the authenticity she had long stifled, feeling an invigorating connection broaden with every conversation. Rejections and judgments became mere shadows, eclipsed by the brilliance of her newfound confidence. In that gallery, surrounded by the pieces that once represented her fears, Sarah finally realized that the storm that had once threatened to uproot her was now a force that fueled her creative spirit. She had not only transformed her relationship with art but had woven her aspirations into a firm tapestry of self-acceptance. As the night closed, she felt a profound sense of achievement, rooted in the authenticity that echoed through the walls of the gallery. With proud poise, she embraced the legacy of her mother, intertwining it with her own story of resilience, art, and the courage to connect deeply with herself and others. "Tomorrow will come," she whispered to herself, facing the horizon of possibilities. "And I will face it with a heart full of color, ready to redefine my narrative." This was not just a closing chapter, it was the prologue to a new story, a journey of self-discovery ignited by love, creativity, and the power of vulnerability. To all who resonate with Sarah's journey, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help spread these incredible stories. Comment your reactions and theories about how you identify with the ending. And remember, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to join this community of overcoming and empowerment.